Okay, we are in the class of protected agriculture, and let me try to do a small review of the introduction to the protected agriculture. In this case, the the last week we are talking about the tropical climates and their different greenhouses. So we talk about the modification environment that need the uh, agricultural production. So we talk about the locations or during seasons in situ is the cause of made protected agriculture is to extend season, address food security, and another things like have greenhouses adaptable. And most of the agricultural use in Mexico is oriented in the north and the northwest. Most of the agriculture here in Mexico. We identify the different kinds of climates, and also we talk about the tropical zone is the most important, and the most important type of climate is the BWH, which is most of the land area, and we know or identify the Köppen climate classification. Just to know, the most important is tropical, and second place is arid zone. After that, temperate, cold, and at the end, polar climate. We identify the disadvantage of the agricultural, protect agricultural, because this is created for Europe. So here in Latin America, it's difficult to obtain adapted greenhouses. That's a big problem. So we have a lot of problem with the quantity of sun or the quantity of production that we need to obtain, because it's expensive to use the technology adapted, is poor adapted to our zone. So identify also the importance of the rural areas facing the high yields, but also in the urban cities, there is some important areas that we could be used to protected agriculture. So in the city, they are innovating better than in the farm areas. We talk about the tropical nation that have a big problem with the dry seasons, and how the sub-Saharan Africa parts in Latin America are facing the use of protected agriculture to improve their foods. For example, though the weather is a very impossible to make good production, and it's important to know that kinds of rock or soil media to produce. The most important we talk about is road wool is the most known around the world. In the second place is the perlita, and also the use of cocoa fiber is very important for this area. And we are describing all the grow media, and also describe it the use of ventilation in the greenhouses, most of them like a natural ventilation without cost of energy, for example. No, we identify the side ventilation, the window, the big window in the side ventilation, and also the roof ventilation in the greenhouses. We also know about the different polyethylene and the qualities of this polyethylene, and it depends on the quantity of years to use this polyethylene in the greenhouses. Or identify also the greenhouses should be 2.5 to 4 meters of height, and the kind of shade used in the window to keep outside the pets is very important. and this shade is antivirus or should be antivirus, and also have very good ventilation for the better develop of the crops inside the greenhouses. So also we talk about the protected shade cloth. This is used to reduce the solar radiation. And this kind of shade cloth is very important in the climate of tropical greenhouses because the quantity of sun used or that we have in this kind of climate. Finally, we talk about the many locations have problems with the water and they need to supply with this kind of recipient. And finally, we describe some of the advantage and disadvantage of the different kinds of protected agriculture in this kind of climate. So number one, we talk about the polyethylene ultraviolet stabilized and anti-drop. This is very important to refuse some diseases inside our greenhouses. And this kind of polyethylene is very useful and also have ultraviolet resistances. And as a disadvantage, it requires maintenance and can puncture it and tears easily. So its durability is good, 2 to 3 years, and have a very good light transmission. The second polyethylene, it doesn't have anti-drop, is widely and variable sizes, relatively inexpensive, and also have ultraviolet resistance. As a disadvantage, it requires maintenance and can puncture it and tears easily. It's a good durability and a very good light transmission. And number three is polyethylene film non-stabilized. This is useful to reduce costs because it's inexpensive and wide or variable sizes. It doesn't have anti-drop and doesn't have ultraviolet resistance. As a disadvantage, can tears easily and durability is poor, only 1 year, but have a very good light transmission and is cheaper or less expensive. And number four is acrylic, is water resistant and break resistant. As a disadvantage is flammable, expensive, and easy scratched. So in tropical climates, is done very good adapted. Have a very good durability and a very good light transmission. The next one is polycarbonate. It have an advantage that impact resistant, flexible, thin, and relatively inexpensive. But as a disadvantage, is easily scratched and reduced light transmission is good for the durability and have a more or less good light transmission. And in the case of fiberglass, they have impact resistant, moderately pricey, and easily to cut and install, but is useful as a disadvantage for small areas. It's expensive in larger scale and reduce light transmission. It's a very good durability and more or less good light transmission. Finally, polyvinyl chloride. This is a advantage allow ultraviolet through the material and can have retention properties. It's not useful for ground climates and short leaf span for rigid cladding. Their durability is regular, 5 years, and the light transmission is good when you are cleaning. And talking about the tropical environment, we have we will have, or we must to have, or should to have structures that have a significant load to the environment because the crop have their own load, and also people giving maintenance have their home load. And normally in these climates, the wind speed is 52 kilometers per hour, and so the material must be designed to a daily rain and tropical storms, which winds are 63 to 180 kilometers per hour. So the cladding and the sidewall designed for removable in case of an storm or an hurricane. So if the winds exceed the 108 kilometers per hour, you are able to disassemble the greenhouses of the windows and also remove the cladding and the trellis system of the crop descended in the tall plants close to the ground or bundle onto each other as a form of protection. So the greenhouse with polycarbonate, it was designed for the Caribbean and it can resist winds of excess 190 kilometers per hour, but is relatively costly. However, it's a good option in this case. And you can say here in this picture that different structure for different greenhouses. Greenhouses are imposed by the occupancy and use because they include the weight of the worker maintaining the structure and also cladding the material above the greenhouses. So the vegetable production imposes an additional load depending on the design of the greenhouses. For example, peppers or bell peppers can impose a crop load of 8.5 kilometers per meter. So tomato can impose a crop load of 10 to 14 kilometers per meter. So a standard resistance of the load should be
Chinga tu puta madre.
50 kilometers. So at the end, the local climate designed for this material is very different. Okay, you can see here the structure of the normal greenhouse of the tropical environment. This is a very small structure, very low structure is also a small tubes, you know. But here in the downside of the greenhouse, you can see a biggest structure that are able to resist a lot of load. This is useful for the winter when the greenhouses resist snow above the ceiling of the greenhouses, for example. So that is the class or the review, the last class.